Welcome to this virtual panel. I'm Allison Heil, CSM at Ampar Technologies and a certified Six Sigma Black Belt. I'll be your moderator here today. I'm actually here with three of our panelists to talk about combating a crisis, how manufacturers are adopting lean principles to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm excited to announce our panelists here today. We have Nick Sainati, the General Manager at Belden Universal. Hey, Nick.
Hey, everyone.
You want to tell us a little bit about Belden?
Yeah, we are a manufacturer in the western suburbs of Chicago. We manufacture industrial universal joints and drive shafts.
Awesome, thank you. And next is Vishal Guard. He's the VP of Global Operations and Supply Chain at DESTACO, a Dover company. Vishal, do you want to tell us a little bit about DESTACO and what you do?
Hi, everyone. DESTACO, yeah, like we said, it's part of Dover. It's a manufacturer that has multiple product lines focusing on automating material handling. So they do work with a lot of different industries and automation and automotive.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, we have Akshat Thirani, the CEO and co-founder of Ampar Technologies.
Hey, thanks, Allison. So my name is Akshat, and I'm from Ampar. We're a technology company here based in Chicago, and we help manufacturing companies better understand their operations through an OEE tracking tool. So excited to be here.
Awesome, thank you, Akshat. So yeah, thanks everyone for being here. We just want to let the audience know that we love to hear from you during today's discussion. So you can ask questions at the bottom of the screen in the Q&A icon section, and we'll try to get to some of them at the end of this if we have time. You'll also see that we have somebody else on the line. That's Abby. She's here. She's kind of working behind the scenes to help with any technical difficulties that we might have. And if you have any questions or issues, you can simply ask a question to her or to the chat panel and message her directly. So also a reminder, we are recording this session. We'll be sending everybody a copy of this recording. So if you have to sign off like halfway through, or if you want to share it with a friend or a colleague, we've got you covered. So with that, let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right into this. So I want to start first with the general question about the coronavirus and its effects. The first question is directed to you, Vishal and Nick. We're 2 months into this virus. What's changed? What used to work and what doesn't really work anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot's changed, right? I mean, from simple things to, how do we clock in, clock out? How do we have lunch? How do we train each other? To how we communicate, to how we have meetings. I mean, everything has changed. We definitely have started working with, our other sister facilities, Dover, CDC guidelines, government regulations, try to understand all these different things together and how do we make it work. And the number one thing that's really been important is really driving strong communication and engagement to really drive a culture of communication to help understand all these things.
Yeah, Vishal, you summarized a lot of our experience as well. Our big difference is, the office is working from home as much as possible, just to maintain social distance. We're fortunate to have a pretty spacious factory at the moment compared to our current staffing level. So we're able to still run our regular single shift, but I do know that there are some manufacturers that have switched to staggered shifts just to maintain more social distance. And we're leaning much more heavily on our communications technologies and our analytics technologies as well, which allow us, really to maintain most operations without being in the factory every day. And surprisingly enough, some processes have actually run just as smoothly with our remote office setup.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know that a lot of us are working from home, as you can see probably in the back of my screen. And there's some short-term strategies that we really have to start working towards in order to deal with this pandemic, right? So how do you guys, how are you balancing these like short-term strategies with your longer-term strategic goals? Are there things that have been put on hold? Akshat, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think, whether it's our partners out in the industry or even internally, I think the strategies that we're using really to build better fundamentals in all of our businesses. And that can come right from, the processes that you have internally to the systems you use, to just even the investment in training and standardization. And so, ultimately, I think that this time is helping us be a lot more process oriented and more thoughtful in the way we do things than just being reactive and, doing things on the go.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Vishal, what are your thoughts as the VP of operations of a large company like this? How are you balancing this?
The short term has been, challenging, but I think it's fun. We found a lot of opportunities. The biggest thing is, we've learned, hey, what processes worked and what processes didn't work. And, now that that person that you would just talk to next door to get something done, but because something was broken, but we never thought about it. So it's been a really opportunity to showcase there. From a long-term perspective, we're really thinking, what things do need to change. Hey, what are some things that, manually we were doing that really we should not? And how do we use technology differently all across the board? So it's opened up some of our eyes of opportunity just from DI perspective, continuous improvement, and help us develop some projects in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned continuous improvement. I know, Nick, I know Belden is focused on lean manufacturing practices as kind of like a longer term goal, right? So what's an example of a project, I guess, that you haven't had to put on hold or you didn't put on hold strategically, and kind of something that other factories could look to implement during this time?
Sure, yeah. So we've had to be somewhat realistic about some of our CI goals in this time of social distancing. We've been able to keep some of our already in flight CI projects in place. Some changeover reduction work that was nearing completion, transitioning to data collection, to paperless data collection on the shop floor, and then just deploying of some time and labor saving equipment. Like an industrial marking laser that we acquired right before the shutdown, but we're still in the process of implementing. We're noticing other opportunities. I think what's interesting about this crisis is it has stressed our systems. So it is uncovering some additional opportunities for waste reduction, and we're trying to keep a catalog of these and fix the ones we can now. I mean, some like the information flow, communications, and other types of workflows that we can fix now. We're kind of getting some quick wins that way. And we're also using this time to train our staff. We just started our team on a Lean Six Sigma Greenbelt training course. So we've got 12 people from our 46-person company right now, going through a Greenbelt course. So we're looking to come out the other end of this stronger, and we're basically taking opportunity of this slowdown to improve our team.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned like a catalog of projects. Can you kind of like elaborate on that a little bit more? Some things that you do to get that catalog and what that really looks like?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think just, we keep a parking lot of projects that, as things come up, one piece, something that generates, you'll end up generating some ideas through like your non-conformance reports, your ongoing kind of operations day to day, some longer term stuff around, SMED and quick changeovers that we've been working on. And I mentioned the paperless data. We've been using Ampar for about 6 months now, and we're still in the process of deploying all the different tools that are available to us now. Does that give you? Is there something else you want me to kind of clarify?
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome, and yeah. And you're kind of talking about like using Ampar to really identify these projects and get to essentially, like a parking lot of projects that even though you can't tackle them right now, at least they're identified and you'll be able to start working on them once, the economy is picked back up, right?
That's right. And that's above and beyond, being able to use AMP. I guess we didn't even mention this, but, as the office works remotely, like we're able to utilize Ampert for a real-time look at what's happening on our floor. And that's like another one of those investments that we made early on, or I guess before the crisis took hold, that's really made life a lot easier to manage during the crisis.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So Vishal, what about you at DESTACO? What are you guys doing, being like a larger company, to reduce costs and operate more efficiently even during the global crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, fortunately, we have a great CI team across the organization that works on a variety of projects, and on our machine shops, as we've started rolling out Ampar, it's become slowly becoming a big part of our culture. Talking about the data every day, talking about how do we use it differently, and the biggest thing that's really helped from a CI perspective is really not just the short-term projects. Hey, can we reduce setup? Can we look at quality differently? How do we save time? It's really helped us, look at our strategic view of machining very differently. And what I mean by that is hey, if we're buying new things, if we're buying new machines, are we really transferring the same problem from the old to the new? If we are we really getting better? What are we doing differently? And the opportunity what Ampar has helped us to do is, from a CI perspective, not only fix some of the basic issues from setup and tooling and things like that, but really from a long-term perspective, how do we make sure we don't transfer that new problem into a new investment? Because otherwise, we really aren't getting better fundamentally. And that's been this crisis has given us an opportunity to kind of sit back and think about those things. Sometimes you may not got the chance to.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing, is like we've seen customers kind of using this time, and obviously it's a very difficult time, right, for manufacturers, and they've been able to really use this time to like you said, sit back, focus, look at our opportunities in a different level where we don't have all of the firefighting going on to distract us. And I think that yeah, that's a really good point, that you could use Ampar in a way, or data in a way, to do that. So Vishal or Nick, I guess, would you be able to share any specific projects that you guys are doing related to reducing costs during this time?
Well, I mean, I mentioned a couple of these, but one of our SMED projects is around like pre-kitting of gauges and tools. I mean, kind of the low-hanging fruit that you should have been doing, but you get to when you get to, I guess, during the the day-to-day rush, and you have a little bit more time now, and you're able to kind of focus in on getting some of these things over the finish line.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the first one I was thinking in my head. So you're absolutely right, Nick. And I think the other one is that we've looked at is kind of how we approach the entire supply chain, honestly. So, hey, today we're looking at how the parts set up. Why do we run 2 pieces? Should it be 1 piece? Should it be 4 pieces? Are we doing the right economic order quantity to make sure our costs and our setup time, everything is aligned based on our volume? So that's been a project that all of our sites are looking at by machine, and are we fundamentally just setting up too much because we're running the wrong quantity? So that's been another big project we're working on.
Yeah.
Vishal, I'm sure, having multi-site operations across the world in a way, sure, it's been interesting to kind of look at how different countries and locations have adapted, just given how dynamic the supply chain in different parts of the country and the world are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The funny thing is, a lot of people think, things are very different, but a machine shop's a machine shop. And honestly, the problems are the same. It doesn't matter if you're, we have locations all around the world, and the conversations are identical. Maybe the solution's going to be different because the products are different, the business is different, and markets are different, but the tactical side of the problem is the exact same. So the best thing is now that we have a tool that we can speak the same language from a data perspective, we all start talking about it the same way. We start sharing best practices and having a cadence to say, hey, what are you doing? Why do you do this? And it really can help us decrease that learning curve. You know, if one site made the mistake, how do we make sure another site doesn't make the same mistake? Because, hey, they've already learned, and how do we get that done faster?
Yeah, getting that tribal put more into an operating system for yourself to just kind of pick and choose projects as they come along. And
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a cool idea. So I love what you said. A machine shop is a machine shop, right? And we all kind of have similar problems. And yes, every factory has a different dynamic and is different in its own way. But essentially, like, what data can provide is really, if you you could look at your downtimes in a standardized way across different factories, you could implement a solution one place, and then if it works, you don't even have to like do any more work at the other factories. You just kind of roll it out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's, you know, that's the biggest thing around this whole, you know, gathering data piece is really, you know, everybody needs to look at the business the same way. You know, what does utilization mean? What does OEE mean? What does the metrics mean? I think that's, you know, kind of a standard package of metrics is important, and Ampar has definitely been a tool that is starting to help us get there.
Awesome. So yeah, we've talked about these projects and projects that factories can really focus on, especially during this time, to reduce costs and run more lean operations. Akshat, I wanted to ask you, are there some sustainability tools or techniques that, yeah, factories can put in place to make sure that things really stick once we return back to normal, whatever normal is going to look like?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure everyone can relate to kind of creating a process flow on paper, and then kind of sustaining it is really the tough part. I think it's so easy to kind of come up with an idea in isolation, but you know, how do you take it to the long term? You know, just looking at through experience through customers and even internally over here, and I think there are 3 ways that we structure it. So the first one is to structure it. So what are the frameworks you can put in place? What are some example lean manufacturing concepts that can really provide some sense and framework for how do you deploy a project for the long term? An example is, you know, TPM, total productive maintenance, really kind of using those tried and tested principles to give structure. But then the second piece is giving the tools, in my opinion, to the folks that are actually doing the work on a day-to-day basis to be better. For example, if you want to really do, you know, 5S initiative, kind of providing the tools, whether it's like a red tag area or, you know, whatever needs to be provided to the shop floor to carry out those activities. And then finally is an audit function, which is often missed, which is making sure those processes and those checklists are happening for the long term. And I think more of the emphasis needs to be on the tooling. That is, do the end users and the folks that do the job, is it easy enough? Is it intuitive enough? Is it easily deployable for them to carry out those functions for the long term? Yeah.
Yeah, Vishal, Nick, do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like giving like certain ways that you've been able to give tools to people on the floor, or maybe set up audit techniques with the data that you've been able to collect?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think a big part of getting these types of things to stick, you know, one, you should never collect data that you're not going to use. So immediately to, you know, a way we've been able to get some buy-in on the data we're collecting through Ampar, and then, you know, speaking more broadly, like any data you collect, any new initiative, like you have to make sure people are bought in. And for us, it makes sense to like try to get some quick wins just to make sure like people understand the why, so we can kind of start attacking some of those like bigger, more complex problems. But over time, it's you know, any change like this is a cultural challenge as much as an operational challenge.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times, I mean, in smaller shops, I mean, historically, it's either really easy to kind of change the culture to a more data-driven culture, or it's really, really difficult because that tribal knowledge there is just so ingrained, right? And the way that you are used to doing something is just the way that it is. Nick or Vishal, I mean, do you guys definitely have different perspectives on it? Nick coming from like a smaller shop, and then Vishal coming from a more like global operations standpoint. What kind of techniques have you guys used to generate buy-in with data collection, and even especially during like the COVID crisis?
I would say number one thing is socialization and visualization. And what I mean by that is you have to socialize the data and make sure people understand it, believe it. That's number one thing. If they don't believe you, everything else doesn't matter. So really, the first and foremost is getting it socialized and getting people to believe you. And the second thing is, making sure, from ground up, people understand what is it. What is this telling me? What do you mean my machine only ran for an hour yesterday? Well, people worked hard and they're trying to understand that. And I think once you get those two major things accomplished, you can start going down the path of SMART goals. Hey, here's what we want to do. Here's our expectations. Here's what we're trying to improve, and here's why. But all that stuff, is after the fact. The first, most number one thing is you got to socialize the information. You got to have people believe you that the information is real, and it's really an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Vishal, I think I think especially at your plant, great job with not just having this as a tool to kind of overlook, but it's really a tactical, system that's not just used by one individual. It's more so for across the plant. It's something to get the conversation rolling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, right? The data is just information. But what do you do with it is a critical part. And the interesting thing is it drives opportunities for the entire organization, not just, hey, for that one person to get better, but really how every single function in your organization makes a decision that impacts the ultimate making chips, right? And that's what the data has allowed us to look at and really drive engagement across the board, not just the guys on the floor, but from our shop, our office employees and people working together, and start talking about a lot of cool stuff and a lot of different ideas. And I think we are only been using the short time, but I expect it to only get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I love that quote by the Making Chips podcast, which is like, if you're not making chips, you're not making money. And it's like such a simple thing to kind of unify everyone around a goal.
Yeah. So, and Nick, what about you? Have you used similar techniques with kind of getting data and certain projects to be a little bit more like sticky, like socialization, visualization, getting people to kind of believe in it?
Yeah, I'm a strong believer of using quick wins to get people on board, to get people to believe. Because once you get people bought in, then you can take on the more complex stuff. If you jump right into something highly complex before you get people to actually believe the data, you're gonna struggle. And like the Vishal brought up the point about believing the data. We measured OEE for years just on using paper tally sheets, and so we would have like an availability number that was perhaps artificially high based on we're adding back time for breaks, adding back time for scheduled shutdowns. When we started implementing Ampar and the data collection became automated in a way, we saw the discrepancy between our tally sheet availability and actually when the machine was running, when the machine was actually cutting chips.
What was the discrepancy?
It's been pretty consistently about 10 to 15%. The actual coming out of Ampar being 10 to 50% lower than the tally sheet version. And what does that tell us? Like that tells us we can probably be more vigilant about deciding whether that's actually dead time. We have 2 10-minute breaks and then a 30-minute lunch in the middle of the day. But, with cycle times of 5 to 7 minutes on many of our machine products, does it really is that 10-minute break really lost? If we're running a pretty stable part, is that 30-minute break for lunch really lost time? Or should we actually be trying to figure out ways to keep the machines up during that time? So it just brings up, there's nowhere to hide when you're not adjusting out time like you can do with a paper tally sheet. So that's, just a kind of another benefit of switching over. But you have to convince people that, no, the way we were doing it before, we were probably being a little bit lenient. This is actually correct, because this is truly when when we were cutting chips.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I can't get over that 10 to 15% higher utilization numbers if you're doing something on paper.
And look, I mean, there's something to be said for, we were being consistent of how we were capturing it. So it's not as if we were like changing it day to day and making assumptions just like based off of nothing. But the reality was it was being hidden by the fact that we were doing these kind of like consistent adjustments. And so, I don't know, within the first couple of weeks of deploying Ampar, seeing that, you're like, okay, well, that was like an immediate place to start looking for waste. So
yeah. Did you get so that itself was a quick win, right? Did you get any other like really quick wins out of it that, might apply to other job shops, machine shops, factories?
I think giving ourselves, it helps to give us a common vocabulary, and it also helps in visualizing. Like I would say like it's much clearer to my team now how much downtime we truly have. And I'll be honest, we have not solved these problems yet, but at least it started the conversation around how much downtime we truly have. It's probably saved us from acquiring a new machine, and just in the nick of time, because now we have this demand shock to deal with for the next couple of months. But yeah, it kind of made us appreciate how much capacity we really have.
That's awesome. Yeah, Vishal, what about you? Have you seen any quick wins like using the system right away?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just by having the conversation, we saw a win, honestly. When we started at one of our sites, we started talking to the operators about them. Hey, what does this mean? Why did this take 2 hours? And I was looking for this, looking for that, and no one's fault. And literally, we're trying to just solve problems, and just by start talking every day and sharing and having little huddles, and small little things were getting improved on their own without big CI projects and formal fancy CI tools, which a lot of people sometimes get stuck in. Right? Just little conversations. Hey, if I move this here, I do this there, I take 10 minutes a day out. And those have been going on for a few months now, and we see it in the data. We see the improvements. The bigger things, might require bigger investments, bigger capital conversations. But we saw quick wins just by having a big screen of information in the cafeteria, and people huddle around and talk about it. I need to make sure that number is better tomorrow, and so it was really positive.
That's so awesome. And I do make like a lean comment here. I mean, typically we've seen lean factories just kind of take those tools, right? And they're like, oh, I'm going to do production leveling, or I'm going to do Kanban. And they think that immediately they're going to get these savings and these tools are going to sustain over time. And they don't. And the fact is that they don't sustain because there's no culture for improvement, and there's no culture for wanting to do better every day. And I think what you guys are kind of saying is like, if we start with socialization and visualization of the data, and we get people to trust in it, then we can start kind of setting these goals, auditing the goals, and setting up these like systems to really get data into our culture every day. Mm-hmm. And that in itself, like if you put a goal in front of somebody, people want to hit it. They don't want to see red all the time, right? So it's so interesting that we're talking about making these things sticky, and really, I mean, honestly, just getting some stuff out there in front of people makes it sticky. So that's really cool. So yeah, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how you guys are making the most out of what you have with your current team. So Vishal, I know that you have a dedicated CI team. How are you giving them the right structure, I guess, to prioritize these projects? You kind of talked about putting stuff out in front of people, but yeah, like what's the structure exactly that you guys are using?
Yeah, I think it's really based on, number one, are we impacting the customer experience? And then number two, where's the opportunity, where's the biggest opportunity? So what I mean by customer experience, hey, if there's a machine or or something that's impacting a delivery, or hey, we're constantly running into issues, that becomes kind of a priority. And then number two, where's the biggest opportunity, right? Even though we might use Ampar on multiple machines, we can't do it all. So we really got an 80-20, and you got to focus and see how do we drive a priority. And then by doing that, it also gives kind of a model to make mistakes on. It's better to make mistakes on a couple ones than 20 of them, and make sure you learn from those, and then you can copy and paste.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Nick, I know that Belden's a little bit of a smaller factory, and you don't necessarily have that like dedicated CI function to do like these types of projects, right? So how are you providing your teams with the right focus and structure to be able to prioritize stuff like that?
Right. So you're absolutely right. We don't have I wouldn't say we have a dedicated CI team. Our operations manager is a Six Sigma black belt, and she leads most of our CI project. Her and her team lead most of the CI projects. But as I mentioned earlier, our strategy is to really is to distribute those responsibilities throughout our company. So we're training 12 people, including myself, to be Lean Six Sigma green belts, and just to understand the toolkit and to be able to lead simple projects on their own. The goal coming out of this is going to be, so each of the 12 people will complete a project on their own that they kind of take all the way through the DMAIC process on their own each year. And we just think that's going to be, it's a way to kind of unlock really just the knowledge that exists throughout the company. The 12 people are from all different functions. And we're trying to figure out ways to use these tools despite our small size. In any small company, people wear a lot of different hats, and we're trying to lean into that. I think that's kind of a big reason people come to work for companies at our size, because you get all these different opportunities. And so we're really trying to lean into our strength in that and be able to offer these types of growth opportunities in our type of company.
Yeah, so that's awesome. That's really cool how, even with the big or small company, you guys are kind of seeing like similar strategies, at least DMAIC, 80-20 rule. And whether or not you have a dedicated CI team who can look at these things daily, prioritize projects and stuff, or if you have a smaller company and you can do what Nick is doing, where you kind of just empower individuals in certain areas and spread that knowledge instead of having it more of a focus like group. So it's interesting because you guys are taking two different approaches to it, whether the company's big or small, but really like the same strategy is there. So Akshat, I wanted to ask you from Ampar, I guess, how would you say that like other companies can take these learnings and spread it across and like prioritize their projects appropriately as well, knowing what kind of running a small company? We're a startup. We have like 13, 15 people now. So yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, so a lot of the points were kind of covered by Nick and Vishal, but it comes down to not over complicating it. There are some quick wins that you can do by simply looking at what are the top priorities. I think ultimately no business is going to fail because they didn't work hard enough. I think that's rarely the case. It comes down to focusing on the right things and being pretty ruthless about saying no to different projects and distractions. So, I think, the way we're looking at it is just, bring it down to limited focus on just the few most important tasks. And second is just get into a cycle of measuring, understanding the root causes if you didn't get the number that you wanted, building a plan, testing it out, and just trying to keep it really simple, to be honest.
That's awesome. Yeah. So it applies everywhere. It's great. Okay, so we are almost at the end of our session today. I think we have about 9 minutes left. I wanted to ask one more question, and then we can open it up to some of these questions from the Q&A area. So on a positive note is kind of where I'd like to end at least our formalized discussion. I don't know when things are going to return to normal, right? We could be feeling the effects of this pandemic for the next 2 or 3 years to come. Vishal, what are some things that you've learned about the industry as a whole? Maybe something specific to your factory that has made you hopeful about the future?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned is people want to do the right thing. And I think, I really believe that everyone is coming to work, self-policing, making sure they're making the right decisions for themselves, for their families. And I think ultimately, that's going to play out in the future with our customers, our suppliers, and continue to find opportunities. Our opportunities may be different in the future, but I think they'll still exist. And we might be building different things, making different things, but I do believe, we'll have different ways of looking at things.
Yeah, I think the crisis is like we talked about a little bit earlier. It has a way of kind of revealing wastes that are potentially in your processes, and it lengthens the list of potential opportunities to improve, and the slow business just gives you a little bit more bandwidth to tackle that list. So, and we're really hopeful that we're going to be able to come out of this crisis much stronger than we went in.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think definitely, I can't agree more, Vishal and Nick. People want to do the right thing, right? And so yeah, I can't agree more. I think that we will end up on the other side of this crisis in a better place than we were, hopefully. And yeah, so let's end with Akshat with that. What are you hopeful about?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think we're just going to become better businesses and better teams through this process, as long as we do the right things and, really challenge the way we look at our businesses. And I think overall, I think folks hopefully come out of this with better processes, better systems, just better overall businesses, and use this volatility and, this challenge to get the team aligned. We're definitely doing that at Ampar, trying to, really use this time to be a better business overall.
Yeah, so let's open this up. We have a couple questions here in our Q&A section. So the first one is, should I say the name? I don't know. No? Okay. The first one is, how do you handle the data when you have a skeleton second shift and not all machines need to be ran on multiple shifts? Your utilization will be off.
So we're a single shift shop, but I can answer this a little bit, just because you almost have to adjust your expectation for OEE. It's really only one factor of whether or not you're being effective. Because I mean, if your schedule is full of jobs that you shouldn't be running, obviously that's going to cause other waste in the of overproduction or of excess inventory. So if you come up with a really good answer for that, please let us know. It's hard. It's like you got to figure out where the pendulum needs to stop. But you got to it's a dynamic situation. Because you certainly don't want to optimize for OEE and then end up with a huge inventory just because you kept machines running.
Yeah, Nick, do you have anything, or sorry, Vishal, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think short term it's difficult, like you said. It comes off as, hey, are we not optimal? But I think that data is really valuable from a long term perspective. hey, how do we, what are other things we could do differently to keep our utilization up? Are we looking at, hey, stuff that maybe we do outside, we can do inside? How do we, are there particular product lines that we should work with our partners to sell more to increase utilization in certain machines that maybe we didn't think about before? So it's just, short term, it is definitely a painful way to look at it, but it gives you the right approach from a long-term perspective.
If I can just kind of add on to that, something that we've seen really apply is having good root cause analysis around those numbers. So for example, some of our customers saw that they had the job orders, but they didn't have the staffing because of the skill level. And in a different situation, they had downtime because there were no orders. And so, this data around the root causes over a longer period can inform other decisions like, information for your sales teams or for your HR functions to drive those decisions. So yeah, the numbers don't look great sometimes. And I think hopefully there's some root cause analysis over there. So it's not just finger pointing around why there's a low number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's go to question 2. How do you prevent short-term adjustments to inventory and costs? And costs prevent longer-term business impacts when things go to normal? I don't know if I really understand that question. I'm going to move on to the next one. Sorry, guys. We seem to have found some ways to remain productive with far less hours spent in the office. Do you foresee a long-term paradigm shift in office work to come from this pandemic? It's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way our office operates is again, it gives you the opportunity to take a hard look at all of your operations. And I think arguably the most impacted operations are those of our office folks, of our sales team, our engineering team, and our production planning staff, who aren't coming to the office every day because we can't keep people socially distanced in our office. So it's going to challenge almost every assumption about how that work gets done. I think we're still in very early innings, and I think it's very heartening to see that the investments we've made in communication and workflow technology are really paying off, and allowing us to work from outside of the office. But I think we're just in very early days of trying to figure out how it's going to impact us long term. But I think overall the long-term impact will be positive to the business.
Yeah, Akshat, what do you think about that? About kind of long-term effects with working maybe from home more? What are your thoughts?
Maybe fewer meetings, more long-form communication. But yeah, I think it's, for a lot of companies, I think this is going to challenge business models. For us, we've been largely doing great remotely because most of our products are self-installed by folks, and it's mostly a virtual kind of operation when it comes to external partners. But I definitely think we're going to become better at running meetings and hopefully have fewer of them.
Yeah. And all right, so next one is, how difficult would it be to turn the factory into a paperless document system, reducing handling of job packets, get documents online, etc.? This would eliminate issues with revision control or waste time looking for documents. So yeah, paperless reporting. What do you guys think?
We're trying. I think we've been able to. It takes time. Part of it was reporting. Getting some of our OEE to be more paperless. We're still in the middle of that transition. We have most of our quality system managed through managed digitally. But yeah, the transition is taking time. But I every day we're banishing a little bit more paper from our process.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we are at time. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, even though I feel like I could talk about that topic forever. So we did have more questions come through. We didn't get a chance to answer them. but we will reach out when this is over with some answers and thoughts. And Akshat also, I believe, has put everybody's name and title on the screen. So please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, and we'll try to keep the conversation going. And also just a reminder, we'll be sending out the video copy of this presentation to everybody who joined. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe during these times and have a good rest of your day and weekend coming up soon.